Welcome to the Fragrance Files.
Welcome to the Fragrance Files.
The moment that I realized I wanted to be a perfumer, I had been working as artistic director at Calvin Klein, and I was very stressed, overworked, underpaid. And I took an aromatherapy class. And at the end, the woman said, "You know, you can blend these oils together and make something that you would like to have." And I thought, what a novel idea. I didn't think of that myself. Very original. But about 6 months after that, there had been just sort of a read every book that was out there. And 15 years ago, there weren't that many books. But it's kind of a rabbit hole. I think a lot of people will agree with me that once you go down that road, you don't really turn back. And I realized when it was a profession, when I sort of the light went on in my head, what if I tried to do this? Then I thought about school and work and all of the real world things. But I realized in that moment that it was a job. So the moment that I knew perfumery was a job that you could do, I thought, maybe I have like a snowball's chance in hell, but I'm going to do it. Damn it. I'm going to try.
So, for those who might not know who you are, can you please introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Michael Nordstrand, and I'm the perfumer and founder of Mythologist Studio. We're an independent studio, so small but mighty.
Yes.
And I guess everyone has Google, so I will put a pin in it neatly there and let everybody discover if they would. You'll know enough about me by the end of this that you'll probably never Google me, which is great.
What kind of digital footprint do you have? Do we need to Google?
Oh, there's nothing untoward, I don't think. But it comes up quickly. Like if you wanted to know a fragrance that I made or what I've been faffing around with outside of commercial fragrance research projects, things like that, talks that I've done. There are some things that are evergreen on the internet that they're not bad, but I don't go listen to myself talk. So they're out there though. You can find.
I'm really fascinated by some of your non-commercial work that we can definitely get into a little bit as well. But um, kind of going back to it, what do you think that people misunderstand about what it takes to become a perfumer?
I've posted a few things about this over the years, but I'm generally just speaking in a general way. But I think the Dunning-Kruger sort of chasm between, not understanding what you don't understand and then, kind of achieving mastery by realizing that you don't know anything, actually. I think there's a big gap in education that's not institutional. And I
Mhm.
don't mean like mental institutional. I maybe sometimes feel like I belong there better, but um, there's not a lot of in between. And part of what I do outside of my regular day to day job is work in education. I work with museums. I've worked with underprivileged youth. I've worked with schools because I wished that, 15 years before I decided my whole life when I was 17 that somebody told me perfumery was a job, I might have had a different trajectory. So I think the training in perfume, there's a lot that you can teach yourself, but there are also things that I think you need a little bit of help, and that's where community can come in, where the
Mhm.
industry is kind of, I don't know. They're very dialed in, but the things they're dialed into are specific, and we'll definitely touch on some ways that they're specific later on. But
Yeah. I really wish I would have known when I was a young person that, perfume was a career path that I could have taken because now as an adult and I'm also in education and I work with I run community centers, but I in being in the world of perfume in the aspect that I am is sort of the it's everything I've done in my life all wrapped up into one. I mean, making content. I went to school for photography. I went to school for culinary arts. I went to school for education, and like it's all sort of in this ball together now. And it's like now all the puzzle pieces seem to fit when perfume was added into it. So I agree. It'd be lovely if young people knew that there are careers in this industry that they can explore.
that's actually really an excellent way to put it. I've found you'll find when you speak to different perfumers, whether they're independent or they work in a larger company or in between, a lot of them have a sort of what might be considered an oblique path to perfumery, and I
Mm.
think a lot of those perfumers have a really enriched methodology about what they do. Their practice is enriched by all of the things that they love. And there are also perfumers who did the traditional route, the school when they were younger, and then graduated up into going into a company directly. That path is not better or worse or otherwise, but a lot of them find that other things that they have as hobbies, as interests, enrich their practice too. So when you say it's the glue that sort of keeps the puzzle pieces all together, there's something in that I've definitely found too. All of those sort of weird interests that I have, the sort of seemingly disparate things that are not connected, they're only connected through me. Perfumery kind of allows me to touch all of those worlds simultaneously, and I think that is what, I don't know, when I wake up at 5:30 in the morning and I think, oh, another day, I can immediately remind myself, you get to go do this thing that people wish they could do, and you're so lucky, and you just have to remember, it doesn't matter if you have a headache, go anyway.
I do think about, we've interviewed quite a number of especially self-taught perfumers, and so many of them kind of stumble into it where they always liked perfume. Some of them didn't even have this long love affair and stumbled into it. And we keep hearing repeatedly that there weren't a lot of resources, especially, it's not even to say that there are a lot of them now, but certainly are more now than there used to be. And it kind of keeps coming up, the read every book you can find, and then go on to some internet forums, and then if you're lucky, talk to Sarah McCartney over in London, and then like find your way into either the Institute of Art and Olfaction or an online course, and just kind of feel your way through it. So there is that sense of community where all of these people are now very happy to help share educational pieces because they're aware that that's missing.
Yeah, it's a combination of, there's a long tradition of secrecy with our industry because we don't have intellectual property protection for formulas and things. Some things you can, trademark, copyright, etc., patent, but not everything. And so there's that historical secrecy, and I think it kind of has played out in a very interesting way over the last century since perfumery advertising really became a thing. Thank you, Francois Coty. Um, I think the marketing now is really creating a lot of noise, and that's something that intrigues me, but it also makes me nervous because just like there are a lot of new voices in perfumery, there are a lot of new brands, a lot of new perfumes being launched exponentially more than even a decade ago. There's also a lot more noise. So there's noise in content creation, there's noise in perfume marketing. It's really difficult, even more now than it was when there were less resources, to, I think, focus on which ones are viable and valuable resources. And that's why I do teach with Institute for Art and Olfaction. I try to do as much as I can. I try to be responsive on social media. I mean, I only have Instagram and I can barely manage, to be honest. But when people ask questions, I definitely try to answer them when I can. And I started working with Christina Loff, who does Dry Down Diaries, on a monthly column, which I thought I was super hilarious and clever to call Dear Perfume, but it's kind of ridiculous.
We love Christina so much.
Yeah, I thought the Dear Abby stuff was fun when I was a kid, and now I'm like, now I'm Dear Abby. So people do write in about things that are general things that a consumer would want to understand, but also budding perfumers, people intrigued by the art form. There are a lot of variety of questions that we get. We are spoiled for choice essentially when it takes, when we go to the spreadsheet to look at what questions we're going to answer for the month. I try to be really in depth, and I can be a bit verbose, so you might have to cut even this answer. But I always try to give people, even if I can't give them a huge long answer, to give them some resources where they could find an answer as well. So yeah, I think it's cutting through all of the sort of BS of looking for just good information is something that I'm always trying to get around so that people can just go direct to the source.
Yeah, no, it's so important to have these resources accessible, and I think, because of the secrecy of it, I think we've led to a lot of hobbyist perfumers that are maybe not well educated enough to be making something that should go on people's skin. And I think it's really easy to make a brand look put together and push it out to the masses, especially with social media being with what it is. And it's dangerous, but it's good that we have better resources now, but we definitely still have a long way to go.
I mean, you also have a lot of the charlatan perfumers that are showing up and slapping, something very basic or even dangerous in a bottle and touting it around as luxury and wanting $300 a bottle when they've only been doing it for like a year. So,
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's it's really tough on a perfumer who does it day in day out to see to even say and acknowledge that that is a reality, because they think, if you think of what we do as an ecosystem, it very much is, and maybe we'll touch on some points about that. But if you think of perfumery as an ecosystem, all the actors in an ecosystem create a sort of ripple effect that touches all of us.
Hmm.
And I think, everyone from the highest echelon of perfumery at DSM Firmenich to me, down to somebody who just found out that perfumery was a job yesterday. We are all part of something. I mean, I'm not going to
Hmm.
sing Circle of Life now, but that's
Hmm.
definitely how it actually is. So when somebody sort of has a debacle about, oh, wasn't EFRA compliant, or I didn't follow this regulatory thing, and it comes out and it's public, or I see there was a brand that shall go nameless years ago. The perfumer behind the brand was tincturing asphalt and poisonous plants and all of these very
Oh.
intriguing things that should not be in a perfume. So there's definitely the safety side. It does concern me a little bit because, again, Dunning-Kruger doesn't discriminate. If
right.
you don't know that that's what you're supposed to be doing, you will not do it, and you won't know that you aren't doing it. It just goes round and round. So I've I've opened up a certain percentage of my business to look at that. So for people who are sort of coming up, I've tried to say, let's have a look at your, like, I'll just screen for EFRA, because at this point it's just baked in. Like, I can just see it in the formula when I look at it. I know, oh, this is going to be out. You're going to need to do this, which is an adaptation that comes from, years of not having the software that just tells you automatically. So you keep it in mind. But there's another update coming. So every few years we have updates, and we have to kind of, everything sort of, shuffles again. It's like when you get the one-time passcode and then it reshuffles. Like that, as soon as some people learn it, it's changed again. So our industry is always changing. And I think, again, resources are not as abundant as they could be for people who want to do this work. And I wish that there were more. But again, most of the money and most of the power in the industry has historically been sat with around six companies. You could open that up to 12 to 15 if you want to count the sort of medium-sized players, but they don't really have a big motivation to have other perfumers. It's something that, the astronaut quote, I think we've now probably exceeded the number of astronauts. I don't know if you know this quote, but anyway, so there's definitely not a huge motivation to better educate the public. I mean, they don't even better educate them in the most frictionless way that they could, which is just perfume marketing.
So, talking a little bit more about, kind of demystifying the craft of it. Obviously, you've been in the industry for quite a while. What does the day to day of being a perfumer actually look like?
So I mentioned I get up at 5:30. That is true, and I so I have a small team that I work with, and they're not all in every day, but typically they're in regularly during the week. So I like to get up and do my morning routine and everything like that, and then I usually get to the studio between 7 and 7:30. And the first thing that I do is smell, always, whether that's just raw materials or current projects. Your nose is really at 100% early in the morning. And that is typically also a very tranquil moment for me. The sun is just sort of rising and there's nobody there. It's quite, quiet, and I can just be a bit meditative. So like some people do actively do meditation. This is sort of mine. I do it within this sort of scent evaluation brain. But I start the day that way, and then typically I have to, do the regular look at email, what things are on the docket for today, the sort of boring admin stuff that is not that exciting, even if you're a perfumer. Um, and then just trying to dig into some of the current projects and things like that. Sometimes I need to do research. Sometimes I need to just sort of explore formulas that we were working on before we were looking at. And then there's, once we're out of that sort of R&D phase, if you will, and then we're kind of actively working on the project, we engage with our clients in a number of different ways. So because a lot of people that come to develop a fragrance don't necessarily have a firm, strong background in how to talk about fragrance, how to communicate their ideas to us, we'll do guided smelling sessions with the client. We will do visual and written translations in that sort of artistic way to help paint a picture of what it is we're thinking about to do for their project. So we do a lot of that multisensory kind of engagement with the client to get them to understand the process. So we're typically doing 49 things throughout the day, but my day to day is pretty wrapped up in all of that. Once we kind of get to the finalized, approved version of a fragrance, then the fun of, sending it off for production and all of those like headaches that can come with that kind of ensues. So typically peppered throughout the day, I'm figuring out, oh, this raw material they've just randomly decided to discontinue. So here we are, and I have to find a solution. Or something comes up with new regulatory and I want to dial something else in. So you line up all your dominoes, and then every once in a while the industry just taps one out of line, and you've got to sort of triage that before you can do anything else. So sometimes I have to just drop everything and go to the fire and put it out.
Yeah. I know they were announcing a potential like quite a few is it naturals or synthetics that are going to be deemed no longer safe for use? That was happening a couple of months ago.
Mixed results, mixed answers. So the
Hmm.
problem, and this is something that if you want to air this, I'm totally happy for you too. People, talking about resources and understanding the industry, a lot of people fundamentally misunderstand perfume regulation, how it works for the players. IFRA are the ones that get cited most often as, oh my God, IFRA and my beloved oak moss. And it's true. I mean, my beloved oak moss, I agree. But at the same time, it's not a legal organization. It's a body that exists within our industry, independent of the other companies or anybody else, that evaluates scientific assessment and reassessment, constant reassessment of all the raw materials in our palette. And they have data points from scientists of all kinds, not just RIFM, who are the kind of research, not partner because they're not technically affiliated, but a lot of the information, it's ongoing and it's evolving. And so IFRA will try to make their best call, and then they publish a consultation, which has been out for a little bit now. So you can see the 52nd Amendment. They are not really banning much of anything. It's more of limitations and specs about what you can and can't do with certain raw materials if they have something, in a natural, if something's not supposed to be over a certain level, etc. They specify that. So it's
Mhm.
not that the raw materials will necessarily be totally banned. It's more about just saying if you're going to use this material, it has to be used this way and in this amount. And if it's a natural, it can only have, X parts per million of this potentially problematic compound. On the other side of it, you have, and I think this is, Mishi, what you're talking about.
Mhm.
Uh, the EU Green Deal and
Yes.
EU legislation. So if one looks at like the FDA in the United States and the Modernization of Cosmetic Regulation Act that was passed, uh, you can see how to be very behind the times. That's a great example, is to look
Mhm.
at the United States. If you want to look at people who jump the gun a little bit, then you can look at the EU. So the EU makes laudable efforts to protect the environment and people that live in the EU, and I think that that's great. But they're, legislatures are not bodies that are used to governing in specific industries. So the industry knowledge, I think IFRA and other players in the industry have been able to lobby to get them to listen better. And so I think that the reactionary legislation, which would have banned many materials just for having one or two sort of compounds inside of them that were potentially an issue, that's been backed off of to a degree, or at least the can has been kicked down the road just a few more blocks. So we have a few more years to figure out what we're going to do. But it's all about, when you're talking about perfume safety, hazard versus risk. So hazard is this material dangerous? Yes, a lot of perfume materials in their pure form are dangerous if you apply them directly to the skin, or if you eat them, or you put them in your eyes, things that you're not supposed to do. But risk is about, at the level and to the degree and kind of use that you would have for something like a perfume, is that substance being inside of it truly proposing a risk? So your skin is actually meant to be a barrier to everything around you. It doesn't want to let anything in. So alcohol and a lot of the things that would be suspended in a perfume, they don't go into the skin. They don't absorb into your body. So I think there's a lot of just fundamental misunderstanding of like somebody's physiology just to begin with. But then, you're able to, for instance, drink orange juice, but a lot of our citruses, including orange, are limited by IFRA. So you're allowed to ingest orange juice, but putting it on your skin is actually more limited. So sometimes flavor gets away with more than perfume does. So it's an intriguing, but also very much a mire, to kind of try to wade through everything and not understand. It's a rough thing to even explain succinctly
Yeah.
as moving.
It's no, it's certainly the unglamorous side of, the discussion of being a perfumer, but it's an incredibly necessary conversation to have and for people to understand, especially when the general public, I mean, just their education just comes from marketing, and the marketing, especially right now, is full of lies or misleading information in so many aspects, whether directly from companies or what's coming from our government. And it makes it really difficult for people to really dive deep and have these conversations if it's not open and accessible for them. So it's really important for us to talk about it.
I like the fact that you called it an ecosystem. I think in our notes talking about this episode, I had a whole section on like the system. Talking a little bit more to the business side of it, you've worked across many different parts of the industry. And what changes for you when you're working independently versus working for a specific brand or client?
If I'm working on something just for myself, of course I do what I like. My long nascent brand is still underway. It's just I'm always picking it back up when it's the moment. Um, but when I work for a client or a brand, it's obviously more of a dialogue. Whereas with my own work, personal work, it becomes a bit of a monologue. So there's a big intrigue for me in the interaction that I do get to have with the client or clients that we're working with, because they are many of them are so passionate. They bring so many things to the table, and what they're relying on me to do is help build this world that they envision. And I think there are a lot of different makers and creators and artists in the world that have the capability to create a world. And then there are way, way more people who have a vision or an idea, a thought, even sometimes that comes to them, and they have passion and the drive to sort of kind of bring it out there, but the skill is what they're lacking. So they come to me when they need help realizing that. But sometimes that translates into, I end up helping to create the brief with them. It becomes something that we kind of work on in tandem together, and it becomes better than it was before if either one of us had done it individually. And so there's a lot of that I really enjoy. Um, There are also clients that I have where I think, I take less of these projects now, but historically, sometimes you take a job because you need to work. And somebody in my position doesn't have a salary that they can rely on, and they don't have their paid vacations. They don't have these things. So I'm always trying to keep the lights on. So daddy has to work. So I'm trying to make fetch happen all the time, but I'm also
Mhm.
thinking like, well, today I'm going to keep the lights on. So there are definitely clients that are saying, I need it to be cheap and I need it to last forever and I need it to be this and all the sort of metrics that people have been evaluating more and more by lately. But the projects that bring me the true joy, and luckily for me, most of the projects that I work on are that really intense creative dialogue between me and somebody else who's working in a different modality but wants to introduce scent into the world. So I'm always trying to meet them where they're at and bring something with me. I'm always like got a basket full of raw materials. I get to say, "Hey, did you think about this?"
You work with smaller independent brands and you also work with some larger brands. Is there sort of a difference in working with one versus the other?
The smaller the brand is, and it's funny, you kind of, when you think about like where you live or what you do, like you give up something and you get something else in return, right? Like there's always a balancing act. I think some of the smaller independent brands, they don't have a lot of money, so there's not a lot of, resources to fully develop something the way that they might want to. Whereas when you kind of go up the chain and you're with a company that has a lot of resources, they have more that they can do. But it's interesting the way that kind of dials up and down when you start to talk about budgets. Um, Very often, the budget for what you're actually putting into the fragrance concentrate, the pure fragrance, that's going to then go into the bottle and be what I would argue maybe the most important thing about the perfume is how it smells, what's going in there. The cost starts to, they want to keep pushing it down, down, down. And for me, when you actually sit down and do the math, we work in kilos. That's 1,000 grams. So 1,000 parts. Our formulas are written on 1,000 parts. When you start looking at how much fragrance actually goes in the bottle and what that, what the cost per kilo splits out to per bottle, it's often, it doesn't go above 1/10 of what's spent on all of the rest, the bottle, the articulations, the packaging, hiring a social media person, all the things that go into a perfume and its launch and all of that, they are exponentially greater than what we spend on the concentrate, even when it's expensive. And I think it's
Mm.
intriguing. A lot of consumers don't know this because they don't see formulas the way perfumers do when they're trained. But um, you might be surprised which brands spend tons of money on their perfume actually and which don't. Like I can tell you one of the most expensive lines of perfume are the Les Exclusifs from Chanel. They
Hmm.
are, there's one of them that easily costs almost $2,800 per kilo, which is
Wow.
huge. And that's not to say that cost means it's better, but it means
Hmm.
that number one, they have the resources to spend literally whatever they want on any perfume they want, however they want. But number two, it means they're picking raw materials not because of their cost, but in spite of them. They're picking them because they're the materials that are right for the formula. And so, say what you will. I think I'm the only person on this earth that likes Chanel number 18, but it's for me, amazing. But it has such a huge dose of ambrette seed in it that there's
Hmm.
just no way most people would afford to make it. And I think there's something about Chanel that's always been like that, right? Like the DNA of the brand is about,
Hmm.
All the
well,
jasmine.
yeah, we can afford to spend as much as we want. But there's something interesting about the people working in the perfumery side of that brand. Say whatever you will about the founder and everything
Mm.
else. You
Lots to
know,
say about that one.
yeah, I'm not endorsing her by any means, but I do think what's intriguing is the people that work at the company and the people that are in charge of the formulation and the thought process and all of that. They're really, they understand their customer. They know what lane they're in. They're not confused. but they do take material risks in their formulas. They do things that are quite daring, and to see them sort of unfold. I mean, I remember smelling 18 for the first time in the store, and I turned to the woman who worked there and I said, "Does anyone like this?" And she said, "No, and I definitely don't." And then she went on and on and on. And I said, "I love it." And she was like, "Oh, like something wrong." So it's funny because that's perfume is such a visceral thing, right? Like
Yeah.
you see a piece of art, you react. You smell a perfume, you immediately react. You have some kind of a, it doesn't, it could be disgust, it could be delight, it could be all these different things in between. And I think that's fascinating for any perfumer, is to just sort of try to disappear into the background and listen to what people say. I love reading negative reviews of perfumes I've made. It's so entertaining. If you want to Google something about me, do that. That's so good. I recommend a good glass of wine while you do it.
I do follow an Instagram page that's like out of pocket Fragrantica reviews, and it is one of my favorite things to
They're
swipe
The
through and
one
just see
that's all
so
the
the
unhinged
ruthless.
one, like it smells
yes.
crazy in here.
I think one of my favorite, yes, it smells crazy in here. So that's the one. My favorite one, because sometimes I have to track down what the perfume is and be like, have I smelled this? But it was like, it's like a very clean baby smoking a black and mild. And it was for Divine Enfant by Etat Libre L'Orange. And I was like, I could see that. All right. I appreciate this weird review that you've done.
Yeah, that's the other thing is that so we're in this era of, I think, so I noticed it maybe 6 months ago, a lot more. And now I've noticed that other people are noticing it. And I think it might have just been, being inundated with copy all the time, doing what I do. But you can start to see the AI
Hmm.
phrasing. It's not this, it's this. And then it's everything is three in a series because apparently somebody told the computer that primates love to talk about things in threes. So like I love to see something that is clearly a human interpretation. I even if it's negative, I love to see somebody say something like it's a clean baby, like that this is just something that a computer could not come up with on its own. And I love those things because they remind me that what we do is it touches people in a place that a lot of things can't. And I think
Yeah.
that's magic. Even when people are saying complete crazy shit, I just absolutely love it.
Yeah. Those are also always the reviews I like watching too when and I rarely consume fragrance content anymore, aside from people that I know and trust. But if you are absolutely ridiculous and I know that you're coming up with this on your own and you're not just giving us the same it's fresh, spicy, clean, power sort of, sort of shit over and over again. And now like the AI in content creation, I mean not only in like the physical video of it all, but it's all over people's scripts too. And it's like, do if you care about this at all, why do you need AI to write this for you? But I digress.
Yeah.
It's funny you mentioned that, people are starting to pick up the way AI writes things.
Hmm.
And it's really difficult for me as someone who doesn't like AI, but is in like a tech consulting space, because the way that I was taught to do business writing is what trained large language models. And there have been times where I've had to be like, oh, I can't put an M dash here because AI has
I
copied the
love
way that I
M
learned to write.
dashes. Yeah, I love M dashes though. I wanted to read English at Oxford. I love a nice M dash. I love a lovely semicolon. Like there are just certain things that are so amazing. But I got read for filth. I don't even remember who it was. So I used an M dash correctly, and it was my own, and it came from me. And somebody said, "I don't know why you're using AI to write your emails back." And I thought, oh, like, so awful. Like no pearls to clutch. But if I did, and I had to like defend it, so I think there's something to be said for there will be a moment in time, I'm predicting, where something not made with AI will be a new kind of a luxury. I think something that's not been touched by a computer will be something that people really like. And I say that being recorded now on a computer and it'll be disseminated through computers. And we are very much in a tech age. But you're right. Like people are adjusting themselves to noticing what's going on, and then they're even adjusting how they write. So it is affecting it. Again, everything is an ecosystem in a way. So the ripple effect of, you're talking about your M dash, my M dash, like we're just thinking about, oh, I'm going to be thought of as a robot if I do it this way. So
Yeah. I mean, we had one of the questions later on in the episode, but let's do it now because we're talking about it. How
let's do
do
it.
you feel about the influx of AI in the perfume world?
Well, let me tell you. I'm going to start with a dramatic reading, if that's okay. You can
Yes.
get it. Well, it's not dramatic. Well, it's a bit dramatic. It depends what you think of this film. But like, the source material of this is a book which I love and I read it every year. And you call it what you will, pulp fiction, pulp science fiction. I don't care. I think there are so many things in this gentleman's books that are relevant to today. And I'm just going to go with a quote from the film version of this book, Jurassic Park. Ian Malcolm says, "You don't see the danger, John, inherent in what you're doing here. Genetic power is the most awesome force the planet's ever seen, but you wield it like a kid that's found his dad's gun. I'll tell you the problem with scientific power that you're using here. It didn't require any discipline to attain it. You read what others had done and you took the next step. You didn't earn the knowledge for yourselves, so you don't take any responsibility for it. You stood on the shoulders of geniuses to accomplish something as fast as you could, and before you even knew what you had, you patented it, packaged it, and slapped it on a plastic lunchbox, and now you're selling it." So I think the problem that I have with anything that's new is when it kind of runs away with the public. TikTok is a great parallel. Before anybody really understood what TikTok was, because it was created in this sort of space where it was being driven by many different factors, many variables, it was everywhere. And I think the fact that the adoption rate of AI is so crazy, and the fact that the attrition rate of people's attention spans is also kind of paralleling that if you graph it out, there's a lot of disturbing things to me about that aspect, because my métier, my entire profession is meant to be built on the idea that in order to reach a level of knowledge to be a professional perfumer, you have to do a lot of work. It takes a lot of discipline. It takes a lot of training. It takes so many different things, where AI gives it to you for free. So I think anybody not earning knowledge, it also takes away the sort of, I don't know, the treasure hunt idea of finding the thing you're looking for. It just spits out answers and gives you something. And I think the formulation side of perfumery, you have companies like Osmo that, they come out strong and say, we're going to solve all your problems and we can do this overnight. Well, I did the Osmo beta where you give the computer a prompt and it sends you 3 fragrances. On the box, by the way, it says, do not put these on your skin. Just
Interesting.
um, but the brief could not have been simpler, frankly, that I gave it. And a perfumer giving a brief to anyone is going to be detailed in a way that it makes sense and it's achievable. I'm not going to give anybody anything that they can't do. So I did like the lowest hanging fruit I could think of, and what I got back wasn't even relevant to what I asked
Hmm.
for. So the three iterations that it gave me had nothing to do with the concept at all. So I know that these companies are doing these things and they're developing what they're developing, but I also think that there's to some degree, um, you're not able to replace the perfumer. So I'm not worried about my job from that standpoint, but I am worried about just globally the entire ecosystem being so flooded and, from so many different angles with AI generated X, Y, and Z, basically.
Yeah, I think in a general aspect, one of my concerns around AI has been, and you kind of spoke to it, this illusion of access to expertise because a
Mm,
large language model doesn't want to tell you no. They want to be helpful and they will hallucinate an answer even if it's wrong.
Hmm.
And because the information is so immediate and because people get the dopamine hit of the discovery so quickly, they want to believe it's true. And especially in the world of like perfumery, if you have someone who wants to make a perfume, they're asking for formulation advice, they're getting incorrect information, but they think that they have the expertise.
Yeah.
It's the opposite of the Dunning-Kruger, where they don't know that they don't know. They think they know. They're being told
mm,
wrong.
Right.
yeah.
And I don't even know, there's not a scientist yet that's described exactly what that effect should be called. And I'm waiting. That's the thing, is like, it's really tough to see these things unfolding and have an understanding from different vantage points.
It almost gets into the realm of like religious psychosis,
Mm,
because it's the belief that you've been told the answer by an authority
Mhm.
without evidence of that authority.
Right.
And I have a lot of thoughts on machines and religion, but
mm.
that's not this podcast. Um, so yeah, it's fascinating, and I do think in the framing of the community of perfumers and people who want to be interested, being fed that incorrect information is dangerous.
Yeah. I think AI has oversold itself in one its ability and one its worth. And I think we're starting to see that. We're starting to see these companies potentially collapsing because they have grossly overvalued themselves. And I could not be hoping more for its downfall.
What I think about it is what I think about kind of almost anything, which is, if there's a way to make a new technology or an innovation in, it could be in our industry, but in any industry really, if there's a way to make it work and it's something sustainable and it's not taking away more than it's giving.
Hmm.
Um, and taking away doesn't have to mean like that the computer's reaching over to you and stealing something, but it filling a gap that you would typically find a way to fill on your own, whether that's a knowledge gap or something else, even like, not to talk about like love and dating and all the things, but like these AI, partners that people have. There's just so many different things. When you find this AI analog to something that you really should sort of deal with on your own, or find a human element to, I think that's where the risk to sort of future development, current development, et cetera, is at play. And there's, I mentioned Osmo, and I'm happy to keep that on the record. Um, People at Osmo say, "Oh, well, there were this many thousand fragrances launched last year. I want there to be exponentially that many."
Yeah.
Why? I don't understand. I'm absolutely lost. Like, you're on the payroll,
Yeah.
so of course you want anything that's going to keep you on the payroll when you've always been a kept creature. Let's say, I won't name what job title it is, but I just
Mm,
think it's really funny that you see people who accept positions like this, who historically you would have thought would have been the opposite end and would have protested it. And you think, it's really intriguing that you've done kind of, it's almost like AI was asked, should I take this job? And it said, oh yes, like absolutely. And so all of the answers to the prying, probing questions that people are fielding from Osmo are all about, well, of course we should be doing this. Of course, it's that, Ian Malcolm again says, you were so busy asking yourselves if you could do it that you never stop to think if you should. And I think
Yeah.
that's just where primates want to do the next step. They want more, not less. Like, we're just primed to think that way. And I think that's why AI has taken off. I mean, like, why would I Google when the next flight to LAX is, when I can ask ChatGPT to tell me, or Claude, or whichever of these things you prefer? Like, it's become a daily mention in conversation, and that's where I don't. It's fast. It's going very fast. So.
hmm
Yikes.
I mean, we talked a little bit about this in previous episodes as well, the AI question that like a lot of it is driven by scale. And when you view and appreciate perfumery as a art form that is attached to an industry, you don't necessarily care about the scale. If you view it as a profit motivator, you start to erase that artistry for the sake of the scale. And that's when you
Mhm.
don't care if there's an AI. And if your paycheck is big enough, you also will say the right things to make sure you stay on that payroll.
Yeah. I mean, I think I'm always looking at it from, I mean, even zooming out further, I think in the moment, people are trying to replace, primarily creative positions with AI. But if you zoom out even further, it's making society so reliant on it and in this sort of AI psychosis that it contributes to the dumbing down of our society. I in schools it's rampant. Kids not doing, not actually focusing on their work, on social media that's also dumbing us down. But it's kind of just pulling us further and further into this black hole where people now cannot get educated and now we cannot advance and we cannot, we're not creating another generation of thinkers. We're creating a generation of people who are controlled by AI, by social media, and not critically thinking for themselves in any aspect. But
I'll say it. I am in this like management course for my day job, and
Mhm.
the outside trainer that we have hired, is telling us that we should have our employees record role playing sessions of how they do their job, and that we as managers should upload it to Claude and have Claude give us the feedback of what the employee should do better. And I'm sitting through this meeting and I'm like, why, what purpose do I serve as a manager then if I can't listen to them and hear what they need to be doing? And it's so weird because like I'm in this room with a bunch of very smart people. I work at a tech firm, and you can see on the faces some people are like, why would I do that? And then other people are like, well, what prompts do you use to do that?
What's intriguing to me when you take that sort of same, like we're having a meeting of you would assume sort of like-minded people, or at least people who are in similar positions, or it's like a round table, you would say. When that's happened in perfume, like whether it's Givaudan's Carto or whatever it is, whatever program everybody's using that has AI capabilities and reads all the different formulas from the market, all the analogs to what's out there, reads consumer feedback, it incorporates all of these data points, right? So it's like, again, a lot of information, a lot of data, but what kind of gets spit out is the same thing over and over again. There's a lot of amazing features of those different programs that allow you to do something, but those things, I'm trying to think of like the best example of it. In perfumery, there aren't truly any shortcuts. You have to learn it for yourself if you really want to understand, if you really want to have mastery. And I hesitate to ever say mastery because I feel like you are meant to be a forever student if you're a perfumer, and the industry is always changing, and so you're always learning something new. Um, but there's something that I've noticed in younger perfumers where they say, "Oh, just tell fill in program name here. I want this much of a greener facet, and it'll spit out." But if you ask some of the younger perfumers, what are three materials that would do that for you? The institutions, the big companies, etc., they already have pre-programmed responses in the minds of a lot of their perfumers because they've trained them and they're the only ones. But like if I point at one of the apprentices or junior perfumers on my team and I say, what could we do to make it X, Y, and Z, and tell me why? Those are things that if you don't learn them, you don't have them. So you can rely on a machine until you can't. And, then what? What do you do? If somebody asks you about your work, how do you speak about it? It just becomes this weird miasma of who am I? I feel like that's the atrophying of critical thinking and rationale, all these aspects of what it means to really be human. And then on the other side, to be an artist, they're really important. And I think we're a bit in the weeds now about that.
Bringing that into the realm of the perfume a little tighter, do you feel like the role of the perfumer is changing right now?
It is. I mean, even my role is changing because, again, ecosystem. Mine is changing because I'm having to speak about these things more. And they are things which they can kind of be divisive. They can really separate people from one another. And I think we need more connection now than separation. Unfortunately, we're kind of going in a bit of a wrong direction in some ways. But I think the changes with the perfumer's job. AI was billed originally as, well, we're going to put this into this program, and it's going to basically, like, if you're trying to figure out why the fragrance is not as radiant as you want it to be, and you want a higher score on the radiance, or it's not testing favorably, that there are these questions that you would ask yourself, which are largely coming from evaluators and marketers, not from the perfumers. The perfumers are satisfied because they created it and they like it. But when you're trying to sort of figure out a problem with your formula, that's where I think AI got its foot in the door in perfume. And now part of your training is to learn these programs, part of your training is that. So it's just following you along like a shadow if you're younger and you're learning this. It's not everywhere, but it's definitely the omnipresence of it. It definitely feels a bit like 2001: A Space Odyssey. How it's like I feel like ChatGPT is like, "Hello, Michael," and it's just kind of like a no, go away. you know? But yeah, I think the role is changing because you don't need to memorize everything that historically that was the only way to do it. And you can have this as almost like a crutch. But again, if you fill in that space in your foundation with this large language model, then you don't have it if it's not there. And I just can't imagine being in that position. Wouldn't want to be in that position.
Do you think the pace of the industry affects the quality of what's being made right now?
Yeah, I mean, if you think about the iron triangle, good, fast, cheap, the industry at large is largely profit motivated, like you said, Josh, like very, very sage way of putting that. Um, if you're standing, it's like Plato's cave. Like if you're touching the tail of the elephant or the trunk or the leg, it's totally different. So for me, I don't know which part of the elephant that I'm touching, but it's definitely an elephant that's in the room and we need to talk about. But the amount of releases it's unreal and it's unrealistic. You can't expect consumers, even the biggest perfume enthusiasts with the biggest collection of bottles or whatever metric you want to measure people's enthusiasm for fragrance by. Fragrance has lost the plot. We don't need more, we need better, and that's
Hmm.
really it. So the thesis of Osmo was we need more, exponentially more, more now. Disagree, hard disagree. We need better. We need thought. We need art. We need soul. I don't want to see another brand with a pretty cool bottle and a bunch of M dashes and things in a series of three in their copy, and then crap in the bottle. No, no, no. I get more angry when it's a beautiful bottle with a doo-doo inside, which is what a lot of the Dries Van Noten ones are. Sorry. A lot of real fragrance is not right. The bottles are fucking art pieces, though. They're so
Yeah.
unreal. They're so gorgeous. A computer didn't come up with those.
And it's gonna be
Right.
worse now that they're owned by Estee Lauder, but that's neither here nor there.
Yeah. But we need better, not more. And I
Yeah.
think every time there's a pendulum swing in one way, it tends to swing the other way. And I do think that like the excesses and the idea that we need constant dopamine hits from something new and finding something new. I think people are just starting to realize that at that pace and at that many, the pattern recognition in what those formulas actually are and what they smell like, it's getting closer and closer together. So it's like kind of when you see, you know, a bunch of slide images and they start to look like they're moving instead of just still cells. You start to kind of compress everything and you can see, oh, these are all kind of the same. They're built on the same idea. I think the industry, I don't know, it has a rich heritage of self cannibalization.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked repeatedly about how a large portion of the fragrances you can find at large stores are orange blossom bombs, and the DNAs are blurring and blending together. And
Hmm.
we're seeing, I think, that pendulum swing where events like Fumed, where independent perfumery and like the art and the story are getting a lot of attention because people want that authenticity,
Yeah.
Mm.
and they're finding it lacking in the niche design space.
Like I said, we've said it multiple times, and I think consumers are, especially people who are very tuned in, are starting to see that. And, we're seeing more and more people come to the indie side of things because they're like, well, I keep trying to find something new and I keep going to Sephora or Macy's and Nordstrom or wherever it be, and I'm just smelling the same thing in different iterations or being sold something that's new and innovative and I get it and it just smells like a dupe of something that I already own. So I think consumers are starting to see past it. It's not, as many as I would like, but I see the movement happening. The bubble is going to burst at some point.
Yeah, you get this big balloon of things, and then you also get this sort of shrinkage, you know, after that. Like things will reach equilibrium. They always
Mhm.
will. And so I'm kind of waiting to see how that's going to develop. But I think something that perfumers get to hear a lot of things behind the scenes, whether it means like we've worked with companies so we know what's going on there, or we hear what a lot of our clients are saying about a product that's not being launched yet. So we kind of know what the next 2 years, 3 years might look like in general. A lot of the things that I'm hearing are we don't want something that you could go somewhere and smell now. We want something that doesn't have that touch point. It can have a touch point like in the heritage of like let's say an amber or fougere or something could have that
Mhm.
DNA, but it has to be something that's a complete surprise or a shock. People are almost like I don't know. It's like they're falling into comas out of boredom, and so
Mhm.
they are looking for something to kind of shock them awake. And I think that's where independent perfumery, it's getting bigger, and I personally have observed in the last 18 months big companies taking bigger notice. And I think France overall, in terms of its relationship to the industry, has begun to observe that the vice grip on the entirety and you know, the artistry and the idea and the craft behind what we do, the grip is kind of loosening. It's slipping a little bit. And I think, the 60 minutes special, which reads like an hour long ad for the French fragrance industry. Um, it's meant to be the antidote, and yet it's so out of touch that I think we probably need a whole episode just to unpack it.
Yeah.
We can save we can save the 60 minutes takedown for next time, but it's just really crazy that they had a whole hour to talk about all of the things that make perfumery amazing and wonderful. They have all of these resources, and what they chose to do is the same kind of two or three things that everybody does in the industry. And it just made me want to barf.
Yeah, being interviewed and taking the time to essentially do a commercial for what you've done for the last half half millennia is
So we are coming at over an hour now at this episode. So we definitely feel like this is going to have to be a two-parter. And I want to leave off on a spicier note for what is to come in the rest of our conversation for people. So, Michael, this is a topic that we have chatted about and I know is very near and dear to your heart. So I just want to ask you the simplest version of this question is, do you think that the role of the perfumer is becoming more visible or more hidden?
Yeah, complicated because in some ways it's doing both at the same time.
Mm,
And I will say, if you are a perfumer that is known in any kind of capacity, if you have any PR behind you, if you have a big company behind you, if you've authored, let's say, 181 creations, and I'm talking about a specific perfumer with that number in mind, uh,
mm,
there's a lot of drive to put you out there because it's celebrity. That's actually
mm,
the difference between, like clout, let's say, or talent or things like that. But your degree of recognizability is something that the fragrance industry has realized, oh, that a name can bring people to us and we can get more business. And so they've started to spend PR dollars on literally shoving the perfumer out of the shadows into the limelight. And so there's a strong version where that's happening. And there are perfumers who are very, very actually amazing at doing the PR and things like that. On the other side of it, there are many different areas where on the report card I would put needs improvement. Um, there are many people in the ecosystem that either do not think of this at all, or for whom it is not something that's important, even if they know it might be to other people, uh, which is who created the perfume. Um, but again, different vantage points, different metrics. The value of a perfume by some people is measured by the emotion that it brings, the memory that it evokes. For some people, it's I want it to last all day, or I don't
mm,
want it to offend anyone in the elevator when I go to my office building. So there's a lot of different metrics that people are measuring things by. But for the perfumers, we're trying to think about all of the things that you are thinking about. And then we're also a little bit of the pie chart is supposed to be about how we get our next job.
mm-hmm.
Say who made the perfume. If you talk
Yep.
about it, know who made it. That's to me seems like a natural thing. Um, I made the analogy to you, Mishi, that like why is this confusing as a concept? Because I've had this conversation with a lot of different people and it's been widely accepted, but by some not understood seemingly at all. Imagine, if you will, saying, wow, I discovered this novel. I think it's maybe my favorite book of all time. It's called The Lord of the Rings by Allen and Unwin, the original publishers of The Lord of the Rings. Where is J.R.R. Tolkien in this conversation? Like this would
Mm-hmm.
never happen. Nobody's saying, oh my God, Dune. And it was originally published by insert publisher here because I don't know. This just doesn't happen with a lot of other media, a lot of other
Mm-hmm.
art forms. So I think it's kind of mental that we deal with this, but it's also an understanding that this is a commodified art form. It's something that becomes a product and it's judged against different things. But somebody did create what goes in the bottle. It doesn't matter if it's your Suave 2-in-1, whatever it is. I mean, I would never, but you know, um, but like it doesn't matter if it's that and actually perfumers that have to work in those more what we call hostile matrices, bleach, detergent, etc. They are the unsung heroes of
Mm-hmm.
the industry. There's this perfumer at Givaudan. She's been there forever, and oh my God, she's so much more brilliant than I'll ever be. She's amazing. These perfumers, it's again, there's a practicality standpoint where you say, oh, well, we can't write on Clorox the perfumer's signature, but why not? That could kind of be fun. I'd buy that bleach. So like there's a lot of people in the industry who are still actually in the shadows and a lot of technical perfumers and let we say personal care perfumers when it's anything that's not fine fragrance. So
Mm-hmm.
there are a lot of different things. I worked on a dog shampoo last year and it was awesome because the science is so nerdy and fun and we did so much cool stuff with it. There are a lot of different things to be explored here and here. And I think um, if you love a perfume, why wouldn't you want to know who made it? Why wouldn't you want to connect with them, even if it's across centuries? Why wouldn't you want to understand who that is and then tell everyone? Because then, let's say you don't like all the scents of a brand. Well, it's four different perfumers. So you like these two, they're the same perfumer. Does it not follow logically that you'd want to see who and what and where? What's the perfumer doing? Where are they at? I smelled two of the perfumes from Headspace, and they were both my personal favorites. Were both done by Nicolas Beaulieu, and he's brilliant. And I immediately looked further into him when I figured that out. So I think you should be following perfumers around, not brands. This brand loyalty thing getting thrown out the window. Be loyal to us. We're the ones doing what you love.
Yep. I couldn't agree more. I mentioned this to you, and before we before we like move on and close out, I mentioned this to you, and I there is a perfumer that he does a bit of indie, but predominantly he is in the more mainstream market. It's Alexis Krujan, and I have loved absolutely everything he's put out. And there's been so many instances where he's not been named on a brand's website, and I have to go searching to find his name. But nearly every time I smell something that is in the more mainstream and I discover who made it, 9 times out of 10, it's been Alexis. And that's why, exactly to your point, it doesn't matter the brand. It matters who made the fragrance, whose nose is behind it. Yes, the brand might bring you the copy, but that perfumer signature, that perfumer style is what's creating your artwork. It's what's creating the fragrance that you fall in love with. So, um, yes, I just wanted to name somebody that I love and I'm following at the moment.
It's not to take even anything away from a brand founder or a creative director or any of the people who are players in the process, but a lot of them arguably get a lot more floor time and space to say and do and exhibit and be whatever they're going to be. Where the scent, I think the authorship piece gets a bit lost along the way, or it's never been paramount to somebody. And I think, again, just like, what are you spending? What are you willing to spend on the concentrate to go into the bottle? What are you willing to say for the perfumer who is the author of the creation ultimately? And I think that's intriguing when I get a mixed response to that.
I have lots of follow-ups, and we'll save those for part two.
Yeah. We'll get into it and we'll probably get a lot spicier next time.
Oh my God. Well, I'll have a second glass of wine next time then.
Michael, thank you so much for joining us today. Um, and we'll talk to you very soon.
Very soon. And I literally cannot wait. And I'm thinking actively of ways to basically have this public forum about authorship and other things important to perfumery uh, this year. So this is just the beginning. This is the tip of the iceberg, and it goes real deep. I'm going to be finding that necklace that she threw into the ocean. Like, I'm doing all of it. We're going to figure it out. But it was a pleasure. Thank you for having me and letting me ramble and get a little spicy.
Thank you all so much for listening. We'll talk to you soon.